Sciatica is never going to get better if we're not addressing the actual problem. And there are so many well-meaning individuals online and in clinics that are trying to help you deal with the sciatic pain, but they're doing stretches and funny hacks to provide a moment of relief and missing the point entirely. To get straight to the punchline, your sciatica is a consequence of the underlying injury. Whether it's some sort of injury to the segments in your spine or a build of inflammation in these little areas where the nerves come out, that is what the problem is. And if you're constantly looking to deal with the sciatic nerve pain, you're going to find yourself doing things that maybe address the pain in the moment, but actually make the underlying problem a whole lot worse. If you're new here, welcome. I'm Michael Fatika, the lead osteopath and spine specialist here at Back in Shape. We help people around the UK and all over the world fix their back pain from home and get back in shape for the long term. And now we've got the punchline out of the way, for those of you that just want to get it, we're going to talk a little bit more about why this is the case and explain so you guys can understand a little bit more on a deeper level why these mistakes are made innocently and what you need to do instead to get more lasting relief for your sciatica by addressing the problem. The endless focus on getting rid of sciatic pain or dealing with the trapped nerve is why people make this mistake over and over. And we wanted to start this off with a quick analogy. It's like you're in the kitchen and the alarm is blaring. The smoker is ringing in your ears and there's just that pain, that horrible pain. And you go over to that smoke alarm and you pull the batteries out and then sit calmly in the corner of the room, finally in bliss, because that ringing in your ears is gone. But the ringing in the ears wasn't the problem. The problem is that the pan on the stove is still on fire. And this is the difference, addressing the pan on the stove rather than just dealing with the ringing in your ears, which is the smoke alarm. And those are the big stark differences between the stretches that we're doing, the movements that we're doing, focusing on the sciatic nerve pain, rather than actually focusing on the real problem. Now, the reasons that the movements that you guys have been doing are most commonly prescribed is because for most people, the sciatic nerve roots, which originate down here in the lower lumbar spine, so we've got L4, L5, it's the nerve that comes out of this segment where we've got the disc, and then we've got the facet joint on the back and all the ligaments that protect the spine. And then we've got L5 and S1 down here in the disc in the middle, and again, the same on the back. That's the region that has been injured, the segment that has been injured. And when we have this, it's very infrequent that the nerve is actually being compressed by a disc against the wall of the spine canal. That is relatively infrequent. But what more frequently occurs is that there's some element of disc bulge, some element of damage. Maybe it's a bit of the disc, a bit of the facet joint capsule, a bit of the other ligaments down there. And we've got an injury. Fundamentally, we have an injury at either L4, L5 or L5S1, and that creates inflammation. Now, what you'll notice is that that inflammation is occupying the space. Unlike other areas of the body where we can have a lot of inflammation, a natural part of healing, by the way, and the skin can stretch and it can accommodate that extra fluid. In our spine, where we've got these little holes, they don't stretch the same. So we get this build of pressure, and maybe in combination with a degree of disc bulge or some other bony spurs that might be making that space smaller, cue spinal stenosis, which will often be mentioned in the same breath, we're going to get pressure building up and either irritation by just the sheer pressure in that area or chemical irritation or both of those roots of the sciatic nerve, and that's when our pain kicks in. So what's the simple solution that all of those stretches that you've probably been doing for a long period of time have in common? Well, they deal with the pressure, the knee hug, the child's pose, the sciatic flossing, and the other peculiar positions that normally involve some degree of forward bending, one way or another, are all doing the same thing. We discussed this in the recent podcast on sitting. They create a release valve to release the pressure. And what's essentially happening when we do that forward bend is as we bend forwards and do the knee hug, it opens out the space immediately or very shortly after, reducing the amount of pressure by enlarging the space that we've got. But fundamentally here, we're dealing with the pressure, which is the excess inflammation, at the expense of the problem, which is the injury at that level of the spine. And we'll discuss this a bit more later on. Fundamentally, for the vast majority of sciatic cases, maybe it was back pain that it started out and it's progressed on, it was some sort of load bearing, but normally load bearing and leaning forward in one direction or other that actually caused that pain. It was picking something up, it was playing with the grandkids, it was a heavy shopping bag, it was putting your sock on, all of that kind of stuff. It's forward bending, often with a little bit of twisting, and boom, something goes. And it's normally going to be a degree of disc involvement. You can see in this instance of the minor disc bulge, it's breaking through some of those layers of the annulus fibrosis. But in reality, we can't injure those segments without, or sections of this segment, without involving some of the other tissues, such as the ligaments, etc., that support and provide stability to that spinal segment. That is what the problem is. And so if we move over to a surface wound, we can see that maybe we've got a cut here. We can see very clearly that the two sides of the wound have moved apart. And in the healing process, they try and knit back together again. And that's what's trying to happen in these ligaments that make up the disc or the annular fibers of the disc and the other parts that support that structure of the segment L45 or L5S1. They're trying to knit back together again. And if we look back at the spine, what we're doing when we're doing these full range knee hugs or child's pose or flossing, the list goes on, or hanging off the edge of the bed with our legs dangling over and creating this significant flexion through here, is we are stretching and opening out those tissues that are just trying to restore back to a neutral position, disrupting that healing process that in the ligaments of the spine, again, including the annular fibers of the disc, is a very slow process. We're picking the scab multiple times a day and not even realizing it. And the problem is, 6 weeks, 6 months down the line, we're still doing the same old stretches and we're not going anywhere. We're still struggling day in, day out. Ultimately, we need to get away from trying to treat the sciatic nerve pain and focus more on treating the problem, because if we do that, we're going to get that long-term resolution that we want and relatively quick resolution in the pain we're experiencing from one day to the next. We discuss simple exercises that can help you learn to stabilize and support and control that spine in the recent episode on the Core 5 for Spine Health, explaining why these simple exercises such as the dead bug, the marching bridge, the squat, the hip hinge and the step up can all be excellent starting points that everybody can do no matter what level of pain you're currently in. You can just adjust them to make them more difficult or easier to suit your current entry point into the rehabilitation process. Ultimately, if you focus on spine stability exercises, you're going to allow those structures to start to undergo a healing process. You're going to develop skills that are with you from more or less day 1 or day 2 that protect that spine on a daily basis, leading to fewer flare-ups of your sciatic pain, because you're actually dealing with that pan on the stove that's on fire, rather than trying to just constantly get rid of the noise from the smoke alarm. Hopefully you find resources like the one we've mentioned just now really helpful to get you started going in the right direction. Of course, if you need any more help, you can always check out the Back in Shape program. That's the full program with all of the support, the weekly live sessions that we do to help you get the results that you need. Stop going in circles with your sciatic nerve pain, chasing pain rather than chasing a solution to the underlying problem. You do that, you're going to rebuild back resilience and get back to doing the things that you want for the long term for good.